Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Mary Kate. I mean, how fortunate are we that we have people representing us on the Hill. They've got a great team behind them, and really do encourage you to interact with them and go and say hi today, and then following this. So I hope everyone had a really great night. It made me very happy as I was, walking through and seeing you all get together as I walked back. I owe a thanks to many of you who saw me. I had a laptop in front of me. I was watching my daughter's game. They had a state championship game last night. And so many of you came and high-fived me and cheered me on as I was trying to cheer her on from afar. So thank you for that. And then as I was walking back to my room, there were so many of you just gathering and enjoying one another's company. And that's what this is about. So thank you for that. And I really do hope you had a great night. We have a great day full of content, and so I do hope that you enjoy the day. But right now, we are in for a treat. Coach Brian Billick, who I learned in our prep call, we just all affectionately call Coach, which I'm totally down for. I think many of you may have met him yesterday because he enjoyed a round of golf with many of you. And I will say just a quick story. As we do and prepare for these, we are fortunate enough to do prep calls, and I've been on a lot of these prep calls, and sometimes the keynote comes to the prep call, sometimes they don't come to the prep call, and members of their team do. Well, Coach was on the prep call, and Coach was asking questions, and he wanted to know all about you, and the type of business that you do, and all of that. So I know that we are in for a treat. There's a wonderful video that will do a much better job introducing Coach than I would, but thank you for being here, and welcome to Coach.
Leadership. It's one of the most essential elements to success, yet often among the most difficult to define. But you know it when you see it. Brian Billick embodies the term leader in all that he does.
What do we say about a test of character? Yeah, a test of character. Yeah, young man, that's the way to show up.
Brian Billick has always kept his eyes squarely fixed on the prize. Patient yet forceful, passionate, fiery, but with a warmth and sincerity that can't be overlooked. A powerful sense of the collective good with a deep and abiding dedication to each individual's needs and goals. Leader.
You can't see the guys over here, but you know they're there, don't you? Hey, you know these guys are over here? Yeah. That's right. That's right. You always got each other's backs no matter what. No matter what. That's what it's going to take. The rest of the year, man, that's the way it's going to be, just like this.
Throwing deep down the middle for Stokely. He's got it. 10-5. Touchdown.
For the baby, Brandon! Whoa!
And the Ravens are the champions of the world. Hallelujah!
Brian Billick has brought unbridled joy to his team, his city, earning a world championship in just his second season.
I could have done without that kiss from him.
That team will be eternally celebrated, not only as one of the top defenses in the history of football, but as a collection of men who sacrificed every day for the greater good, the hallmark of a leader. Now, Brian Billick has proven that these methods will indeed stand the test of time. He has developed, and more importantly, enacted, his principles for success, which carry not only on the football field, but throughout all walks of life.
We have got to find, individually, more personal discipline. Do you understand what I'm saying? We are not going to get where we want to go if we don't develop the personal discipline and accountability for our actions.
Brian Billick, hard-charging, single-minded, visionary, leader, and winner.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, LP. I really appreciate you having me. And by the way, y'all need one of those videos. You do. It's worth the money. Because, when the wolves are at the door and they think you're the village idiot and whatever, you pop that in the morning and think, at one point I knew what I was doing, so I'm okay. Thrilled to be here. Really enjoyed the golf yesterday, getting to meet a few people. I do have to, is Dylan DeWitt here? Dylan. Hey, my businessman, you'd be peeing in a cup after this event because nobody hits the golf ball that long. That was unbelievable. Every hole we went to, they had the longest drive on it, had your name on it, man. I need to take some lessons from you. But really enjoyed getting a chance to meet some of y'all, and I love getting out and visiting with companies because at the end of the day, as we all know, anytime you stand up amongst your peers and talk about something, articulate something, one or two things happens. You either remember one of those past practices, best practices that you used to adhere to that maybe you've gotten away from a little bit, or you find one of those hidden gems that maybe you hadn't thought about before. I equate it, it's like the Baptist minister that was giving a service on the 10 Commandments, because they thought someone stole his bicycle, and when he got to thou shalt not steal, he was going to look around and see who looked nervous, till he got to the part about thou shalt not commit adultery, and he remembered where he had left his bicycle. So what I want to do today is see if we can connect. And at the end of the day, even as arrogant and egotistical as I'm supposed to be, I wouldn't begin to stand up here and try to tell you about your business. What I want to do is tell you about my business, tell you about the NFL, because it is very much a business. Also, in contrast, I just turned 70 years old. So obviously what you all are doing is very real to me right now. I told the guys the other day, turning 70 didn't bother me. It's the fact that I'm sleeping with a 70-year-old has just freaked me out, okay? And every time I say that, my wife goes, well, we can end that real quick. So that stays in this room, okay? So I want to talk about my business. And believe me, it is very much a business. Trust me, job one, 1A, prime directive, mission statement, National Football League, and ownership will tell you, we sell stuff. Right? It really is. It comes down to that. Tickets, broadcast rights, merchandise, and believe me, that is job one in the NFL. Now, we happen to have it wrapped around an entity, a product that there seems to be insatiable interest in, which is great. But the layers of our business that is very much business, from ownership to the coaches to my workforce, which is a highly compensated, highly skilled workforce, to even the clientele. And for them, it is very much about business. My players, when I get them, are all about business. They've learned the language of business. Nothing personal, just business means you just got screwed. Business as usual, you're going to get screwed again. And the one we coaches are all too familiar with, it's an unfortunate side of the business, which means you just got fired, right? In the 9 years I was the head coach of the Baltimore Ravens, there were 86 head coaching changes in that decade, in a field of 32. That means my industry turned itself over 3 times in that decade. I was one of the lucky ones to last as long as I did. And we got any Raider fans here? Okay, yeah. 7 head coaches in 10 years. Okay, 7. To me, that's like the guy that's been divorced 7 times. Okay, maybe it's not you. But at some point, you got to look at how you're choosing these people, right? So the business aspect of it is going to insert itself. And here's the tough part, because none of us have employees anymore, right? They're associates, they're coworkers, they're team members. Everybody wants to build and sees the key to their success is to build that team mentality. Obviously, something very prevalent in my business, at least what the aspect of the business that I was in charge of. And so everybody wants that. But at the end of the day, no matter where you learned your team building principles, a pool, a court, a field, a diamond, a classroom, wherever you got that mentoring, you get into the real world and that business side inserts itself, right? And there's going to be that contrast. You think about it. Ownership, job one, sell stuff, make money. Management, for me, okay, it's all about winning games, putting a team together, and sustaining the image of what we're doing. And my workforce, that again is entirely motivated differently because the owners want to sell stuff. For me, there's not a line in an NFL coach's contract, that says anything about leading the league in offense or defense or this or that. You win games, you make a pot full of money. You lose, you're gone. There's not a line in an NFL player's contract where he makes a penny for winning or losing. It's about his touches, his catches, his tackles, whatever quantifies his individual achievements that get him the next contract. Because you recognize, again, in the team building principles that we all learn when we're young, with the idea is there is no I in team, and the tide rises all ships, and I've got your back and you've got mine. You get into the real world, you get into that business environment, and you recognize, well, there's no I in team, but there's a me. And the tide rises all ships, but some ships rise a little higher than others, right? And you've got my back and I've got yours if it suits my purpose. So fighting through that is very difficult in creating this team mentality. And it applies to your clientele as well. I learned that when I was in Minnesota last year there, 98 year. Phenomenal group of athletes. We went 15-1. We broke the all-time scoring record. Scored more points than any team in the history of the National Football League. Now, I used to do a radio show on Mondays because I thought it was important to let the fans get directly to the play caller, right? Because y'all think you know football, right? You always get the same criticism. Oh, you're so predictable. I know exactly what you're going to do. I can run it or I can throw it. You got a 50-50 chance, right? It's not that tough. So I used to do a radio show on Mondays, unfiltered through the media, so that the fans could call in, kind of ask their questions and make their criticisms or whatever they wanted to do. No one had done that before, kind of a dicey thing. Well, when you're 15-1 and you break the all-time scoring record, obviously the radio shows weren't that bad. We played the New Orleans Saints, and it was one of those phenomenal games. We won 50-66. We scored on every single offensive possession, which is just, it's never done. So I figured, how hard's the radio show going to be? Well, I get on, and the first guy up starts ripping me up one side and down the other. You're the worst play caller. They ought to fire you. You don't know what you're doing. That last call was ridiculous. So I said, time out. Wait a minute now. The last call was a flare pass to the fullback. He scored untouched. What's your problem with that? He said, I had Chris Carter in my fantasy league, and you cost me the weekend. Right? So everybody has got a personal agenda. Everybody's got a personal perspective as a member of this team that as a leader, you have got to somehow manage and deal with if you're going to be a successful organization, whether it's upper management and their prime objective, your workforce, and even your clientele, let alone what your vested self-interests are. Now, your business, my business, has been and is now made up of the same three things: personnel, structure, and chemistry. Who, what, and why. We'll talk about all aspects of that, but there's something I want you to think about. Usually I wait to the end of the speech to give you my 3 principles for success. These are things that I believe in through my 50 years of coaching, 35, 40 years in the National Football League, that I believe in my heart, and they're not just cliche. But 1, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. 2, people don't follow you because of what you say. They follow you because of why you say it. And 3, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. I want you to think about those as we go through this progression of the who, what, and why of an organization in the National Football League. And it begins with personnel. Now, again, the business side. Personnel in the National Football League this year, the personnel budget for the National Football League is right around $9 billion. Each franchise has, via the cap, between $280 and $300 million to pay its workforce. Now, you would think that would be enough, okay? Because the easy way in the, hey, team building, we're all in this together, it'd be simple. I'll take the $300 million, divide it equally among my 53 players, making them all millionaires 5 times over, and all I would do is piss off half my team, because the business side says that some aspects of the team, some players, some positions are valued higher than others. And that's a difficult concept to come into when you're going to build a team. Think about this. When you get a head job in the National Football League, I was an assistant coach, I was in college football and pro football, I was an assistant coach, I was a coordinator, you work your way up, you display a certain level of ability that people think you could be a good head coach, you prepare for that, you prepare for that meeting, you prepare to sit with ownership to explain to them, this is why I'm your man, this is why I can lead your team, this is why you want to hire me as your head coach. You go through that exhaustive process, you get the job, and then the next day, the very first thing you have to do in building this team is to deal with the cap and say, well, in order to keep you, I got to take a little out of your contract. And for you two to stay, you got to go. Not much of a team building process, right? When you bifurcate your team immediately on business terms. I long advocated the league. It'd be a lot easier. In Baltimore, we had a 90,000 square foot indoor facility. I said, this would be a lot easier if I tell you what, I'll pick the 53 players, we'll throw in the 300 million, let them figure out who gets what. That'd be a pay-per-view event. We'd sell a lot of beer at that. The problem is for me, Ray Lewis would come out with the whole 300 million, and I'd have 52 players that are upset. So the very first thing I have to do as this leader of this team, trying to bring them together for a common goal, is to insert the business aspect of the finances and how we put that together. And that's not easy. The other way would have been a lot easier. And it's even now filtered down into the college game with the NIL and the portal and all that entails. So that business aspect of building this team is going to insert itself immediately. So let's begin with the personnel. Now, obviously, when I bring personnel into my organization, there has to be a core competence. There's a certain level of ability that, yes, they can do the job and they can function in what they're doing in varying degrees. But that's not where the difference is going to be made, because you can quantify that pretty easily and you can identify it. It really comes down to, when you're bringing them into the organization, what their mindset and whether they're going to buy into the team concept that you're trying to build. I always go back to the adage of the bacon and egg breakfast. In a bacon and egg breakfast, the chicken is involved, the pig is committed. Think about that, right? The chicken, the part-timer, the mercenary, versus the pig, the professional, the patriot, right? That contrast. Now, I will tell you this. The difference between the chicken and the pig, you're not going to have an entire organization of pigs. I've never seen it. I've never had a team, because there's a lot of different vested self-interest and maturity within the organization before they become one of your pigs, your patriots, your professionals, one of your gatekeepers, right? I put the number at about 30%. If you don't have 30% of your core group are the pigs, you're going to have a problem. I don't come by that number arbitrarily. I've written 5 books. And in the publishing business, they'll tell you that 30% is where the profit margin comes from, 70% of the lost leaders. In Major League Baseball, we're just finishing up with the World Series. Proven adage, no matter how good you are, you're going to lose a third of your games. No matter how bad you are, you're going to win a third of your games. It's that 30% plus that makes the difference between a champion and a non-champion. I heard a comedian get into a lecture series and said, look, when I stand up and do a routine, I can't get the whole team, the whole audience on the routine. I focus on about 30%. And if I can get them into the routine, they're their gatekeepers. If I can get them into it, then the others are going to follow along. And this idea of the chicken or the pig, it refers to management as well. When I was with the Minnesota Vikings, we had 10 owners. Now, they were good people, all of great means, and their initial buy-in was, compared to what the value is now, was not much. But wonderful people, professional people, people of means, but they were all chickens. They really weren't interested in pushing the organization forward. They were in it for different purposes. Now, Steve Bisciotti buys the Baltimore Ravens for $1 billion, okay? Steve Bisciotti's a pig, and I don't say that just because he fired me, okay? Yeah, he's all in. And so it applies, obviously, to your management. It applies to your players as well. And this goes back to when you look at your personnel and who you're bringing into the organization. My daughter's the VP of HR for Abercrombie & Fitch. They have a programmable 20 to 30% turnover in their management because they want that fresh blood coming in all the time. They want that fresh perspective. So as you're bringing people into your organization, and how your first job as a leader is, who do I want to be my partner? You know, we used to have a sign on top of our draft board that says, those who won't are no better than those who can't, all right? Talent is important, and the last thing you want to do is let talent walk out of your building. But if they're not going to buy into your team concept, if they're not going to buy into your principles, if they're not going to drink the Kool-Aid, as they say, then they're going to be dysfunctional for you. It's not going to work. And so that's job one when you look at that. And it's hard, particularly with young people today and the way they're schooled. We have in the NFL what's the Indianapolis Combine. It's in Indianapolis, Indiana. We bring in the top 350 players in the country. And we all at one time. So every coach and player and manager and personnel guy and doctors and trainers, we're all there. And it's a week-long, exhaustive, and we weigh and measure and work them out. The best part about the Indianapolis Combine, as the head coach, as the head of the organization, that I have to decide who we're going to bring into this organization. I get 60 15-minute interviews with the players of my choice. And this may be the only time, just because of the structure, sit down and look face-to-face with a guy who I'm going to make my partner, give him ostensibly millions of dollars to see if he's going to be a member of my team. This may be the only time I have a sit-down face-to-face to get a sense and to look into his soul and see if I want him to be a partner. Now, young people, I always say young and stupid's one word. Okay, we were all young and stupid. And most of the players we bring in, a lot of them have been through some stuff. We get a rap sheet on every player that comes in. And there was one young man, and again, these guys are very well schooled. They're agents, they're representatives. They school them getting ready for this because they know when you sit down with the head coach in the organization, they're going to ask these questions, and they coach them up, as all the young people today via the internet and all the training they have. As you know, they're very polished. They know what to say. So you got to figure out, how am I going to cut through and find out what this person's about as opposed to what he's just been schooled to talk about. So we had this one young player come in, and I'm looking at his rap sheet. Nothing really serious, just a lot of stuff that said he'd been in some bad situations and made some bad decisions. So he sits down and he immediately starts into his mantra that he's been taught. I go, what, time out, son. Look, you're tired, I'm tired. I only got 15 minutes. I just have one question. I'm looking at your sheet. Are you a thug or are you just stupid? And he pauses and he goes, are those my only options? So I thought, okay, he's not stupid. But I'll tell you, that young man came into the National Football League, was very productive, was a great member representing the shield of the NFL, representing his city, representing his team. See, you don't know. It's hard to fight through some of the noise around the person that you want in your organization. And are they going to buy into what you're doing? Because it's so important. When I'd start training camp, I have 90 players. And then I have basically 5 to 6 weeks to whittle it down, and at the end I come down to my 53-man roster. And again, I think it's 8 or 9 on the practice squad. So roughly say 60 players. And that's hard to do because you're with these young people and they're working hard, and particularly when you sit down and have to cut a young man. And I played in the NFL. I was cut by both Cowboys and the 49ers. You're ending basically a lifelong dream. And I never took that lightly, all but at a young age. We had one time, and it's a mass, because again, you go from 90 to 53 and then 60 players. It's bodies flowing through, and coaches and scouts bring players in and sit you down, and I have to sit down and explain to a young man, no, your dream of being an NFL player is over, at least it's over for here. Not an easy thing to do, because I've lived that. There was one time, they brought a young man in, he sat down, and I'm going through my mantra, and well, it's just not going to work here and whatever. And the look on his face, I could tell was, this kid's not getting it. He should know he was on the bubble. He should have known this was a possibility. This kid's got to look. And then it dawned on me, they brought me the wrong guy. They brought me a guy we're going to keep. Well, now I look like the village idiot because how do I get out of this? So I look at him, I go, this is what it feels like to be cut. I don't want to have this conversation with you. Turned it into the brilliant teaching moment. So this idea of bringing people into your organization and the criteria that you have, and I will tell you this, my daughter, I've learned through my daughter, in fact, I just spoke at Abercrombie & Fitch a couple weeks ago. They have a very stringent algorithm as to the personality traits that they're looking for when they hire someone. And my daughter fought that a little bit earlier in her career. Because, you don't want to, it can't be just the science, just can't be the analytics. I see this person, I've got a gut feeling about it. I think they'd be good for the organization. And she'd say, Dad, as sure as, you can imagine, anytime I went outside the algorithm, it usually came back and bit us in the backside, that it didn't work. Because even though it sounds stereotypical, they're stereotypes for a reason. There's a certain type of person they were looking for, and it's same within the NFL. You've got to decide what it is your structure, what your priorities are, the type of person you're looking for. And that 53-man roster is pretty easy to put together until I got to that 53rd, 52nd, 51st, 50th person, because then I was going to have to make that tough decision. All right, this player may be a little more talented, but this player buys into what we're doing. this guy is going to be that good team player. So you sometimes have to let that maybe superior talent, because you've, particularly on the back end of my roster, someone that truly buys into it. Tell me this doesn't exist for you. This brings it into very sharp focus. Either now or previously in your work design or in your company, you had somebody that was just intuitive about what they did. They understood. They were productive. They could make it work. They knew how to get the connectivity, and they were one of your best producing employees. And they were an asshole, right? Now, I can't see you all, but I know some of you, okay, don't turn my eyes. I don't want anybody to see what I'm looking at here. You've got to be very careful about being seducted into that talent and that productivity if it's at the cost of the energy and the focus of your organization, because that does happen. When you get, and you see it all the time in the NFL, you get that selfish player. You know, players can, you know, they're classic during the tough times, jumping up in the soapbox and going, I confess, he did it. That kind of personality. You cannot underestimate the drain on the collective energies of your organization when that exists. And that's hard. That's hard to let that kind of talent walk out the building. But if they're not going to buy, if you truly believe that it is the team aspect of what you do, that therein lies the most success, that's hard to do, but you've got to buy into it in terms of, you know, having that potential pig and that person that's going to buy into what you're doing. So you got your pig, your patriot, your professional. Now you get into the what of what you're doing, which I always find interesting. Y'all love mission statements, okay? I love visiting with individual companies and organizations, talking about their priorities and their mission statements, about what they're all about. In fact, it was interesting. I did an airline group, and the head of the airline got up, and it was fascinating because he says, look, there's a lot of things we want to be here at this airline. We want to be the on-time airline. You know, we want to be profitable, obviously, job one. We want to be on time. We want to serve a good meal. We want to be the number one in baggage claim. I'm always reminded of Lou Holtz's story about going to, good luck with that, going to the airport and telling the agent, I want that bag to go to Miami, that one to go to Detroit, and that one to go to Chicago. He said, sir, we can't do that. He said, sure you can. You did it last week. So the head of the airline says, we want to be all these things, but we got one prime directive, one job one, to get from point A to point B safely. Okay, now we all that traveled here flew in and got to appreciate that prime directive. The challenge for that individual is that the dictates of the individual that is the head of maintenance or scheduling, at some point, their priority in getting their job done is going to come in conflict with job one of getting there safely. And you better have someone in that position that understands, okay, this may not be in my best interest. It may put my division at risk, but it's better for the whole if we do this. It's your job as management to understand those kind of restraints on that individual, for understanding that adhering to the prime directive, being that team player, is sometimes going to put them at risk. And it's your job to recognize that. A perfect example, because believe me, by no stretch of the imagination, your workforce is going to judge you based on the goals and objectives you put in front of them, okay? I learned a long time ago, anytime I stood in front of my team, I was going to put SMART goals and objectives in front of them. SMART meaning specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. When I came to the Ravens, they had given up like 100 sacks, worst in the history of the NFL. Now, I could have gone up and done my best Newt Rockney emotional, okay, this year we're not going to give up a single sack. And I'd have lost most of my veterans because they'd have gone, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Of course we're going to give up a sack. It was specific and measurable, but it wasn't attainable. It wasn't realistic. So when you stand up and you try to adhere to your prime directive, to your mission statement with your workforce, job one is that you understand how that affects them and how it's going to affect their job performance and how they're going to be rated. If you don't, you're going to miss the issue, and you're now going to force them into making decisions about what's more in their best interest than the organization. I'm wearing a Super Bowl ring because we had a group of individuals in 2000 Perfect example, put the business aspect to it. Had two defensive ends, Michael McCray and Peter Boulware. Now, both these guys are guys that had led the league in sacks at some point in their career. And you lead the league in a category in the National Football League, that could mean upwards of $1 million in bonus. That's real hard cash. Now, you go to the first playoff game in the NFL and win, I think, I may be wrong, it may have changed, I think it's like a $50,000 payoff. Now imagine a Michael McCray and Peter Boulware. Understand the structure of defense. Their job is to, on a given game, maintain, contain, keep the quarterback in the pocket. Now imagine the thought process. The offensive tackle oversets high, and Michael McCray sees, I can go inside, not do my job, go inside, maybe sack the quarterback, maybe lead the league in sacks and get $1 million. Or I can do my job, don't put my other players at risk, maintain, contain, keep him in the pocket, don't get the sack, and my first payoff may be $50,000. And I'm wearing a Super Bowl ring because I had enough pigs that said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to put myself at personal risk or at possible non-reward by doing my job because I believe that the collective goal of what we want to do is more important. I'm not going to put my other players at risk by breaking out of my responsibility and doing something wrong. That's how you end up with the championship pedigree and winning. I'll give you an example of the marrying of this prime directive, understanding what the priority is, with your personnel. Two stories. One is true because I lived it, one I'm told is true. Team in upstate New York, high school team, 3-year high school. They're playing the last game of the season, typically as you do against your crosstown rival or your biggest opponent. Now, this coach goes into the game. His seniors, they'd lost every single game. They go into the game. It's a 0-0 tie. They're on their own 40-yard line. Less than 30 seconds left to play. Now, as unambitious as it sounds, the coach decides, I'm going to go for the tie. It's third down. I don't want to go for it. The ball might get tipped, might get intercepted. If we have to punt, maybe they return it. I'm going to go for the tie. So he calls his quarterback over and he says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go on a quarterback sneak, let the clock wind down, take a snap, 2-3 seconds on the clock, game over, 0-0 tie. So the quarterback goes running onto the field. Now, this team was ready for every double reverse, pitch back. What they weren't ready for was a quarterback sneak right down the middle of the defense. The kid goes 59 yards down to the 1-yard line. And you know what he did. Went up, took the snap, took a knee, game over, 0-0 tie. Now, the coach comes running on the field, and I got to tell you, that coach could have choked that kid to death. Not a court in America would convict him. Because the dumb took a knee on the 1-yard line. So he goes running out. And he goes, son, what were you thinking when you took a knee on the 1-yard line? And his answer was brilliant in simplicity. He said, I'm thinking you're the worst play caller in the history of football. He had a chicken at quarterback who didn't understand the prime directive, that could think outside the box from what he was told. I've always said there's two types of players that can't play for me. The player that can't do what he's told, and the player that can only do what he's told. So he didn't get the big picture and how he was going to have to think outside of what he was specifically told to do in order for the best interest of the team. Flip side of that, we're down in Jacksonville. We're back to our 20-yard line. Inside 2 minutes, quarterback does a great job taking us down to the 6-yard line. We're down by 5, so we need a touchdown. We got time for one play left. Now, I'm like every anal, retentive, obsessive coach you've ever known. I got to play for every situation. For us, it's 3 wides, train right, fake whiz, jet right, H drive, Z post. Now, I understand you didn't understand the word I just said. Unfortunately, neither did my quarterback. Because here's what's supposed to happen. There's the post at the back of the end zone. If they don't honor the post, hit the post. Put a tight end underneath him. If they don't honor, if they honor the post, they open the tight end, you hit the tight end. If they take the post, they take the tight end, and a little shallow route underneath. It's all here. Post, sit, shallow route. Well, my quarterback drops back and throws to the ex-receiver on the backside for a touchdown. So I come running out on the field in a little bit better demeanor than that other coach. And I had to ask, I said, all week we'd practiced, we'd designed it. It's got the post and the sit and the shallow. What made you go back there? And again, his answer was brilliant in simplicity. He said, because he was open. Right? I had a pig at quarterback.
that understood, look, we said this is what we're going to do. Here was the dynamic of what it was signed up to do. But I'm sizing up the situation, and I think it's our best chance for success. And I would have needed to underwrite that, because a lot of things could have gone wrong. Could have been tipped, could have been dropped, could have been sacked. And I could have jumped all over him for, well, you didn't do what we said we were going to do, but he did it for the right reason and the right analysis. So I would have had to underwrite that. So it's so important that that understanding of the goals and aspirations you have for your organization and how they trickle down through your organization. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. People don't follow you because of what you say, they follow you because of why you say it. When you put those together, that brings us to the why, right? Because really when it comes down to it, as a leader, the leader of your organization, the leader of my organization, 80 to 90% of the things that I do as the leader are really as a manager, aren't they? The fundamental, the who, what, when for my team, who's going to be on the team, what are we going to practice, how are we going to practice, when are we going to eat, how are we going to travel, the kind of the mundane logistics of obviously operating that are pretty straightforward, pretty quantifiable. What challenge you, where you fall into the leader aspect of your job is now getting everybody on the same page to be motivated and energized to adhere to the basic principles that you're working over. That's where the leadership, that why. People don't follow you because of what you say, they follow you because of why you say it. Connecting with those individuals as to why they should go along on a daily basis. The old way was easier. It really was. The Parcellian, my way or the highway, and you stay on the top of the organization throwing down these lightning bolts of inspiration and direction, and people just did it, you know? I got a few peers here. In the old days, what was it? Coach says jump. You said, how high? You say jump in the NFL now, and it's, well, why? Is that my contract? And how much do I make for that? And you know what? You better have answers for that. Because that's part of that motivating is making sure that they understand connecting that vested self-interest to the collective team goals and team aspirations of what they want to get done. And that's done on almost a daily basis. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people think leading is being done so by fear. Fear is a hell of a motivator, but it's short term. When I was at Stanford University, you always have a car deal, and my car dealer was a Ford dealership. And I remember when I'd go in, there'd be a sign behind him that said, Ford Sales Incentive Plan. Sell cars or you're fired, okay? Pretty good. The problem is fear is short term. It can't be sustained. That's why you see a lot of coaches, old school coaches, that only stay in an organization only so long. Because that authoritarian, this is the way we're going to do it, or I'm going to run you out of here, only lasts so long. Otherwise, you wear your team out, and they realize, I got to go someplace else. I got to change venues. But if you're really going to buy into this team collective, and that you truly believe that that's the best way for you to succeed, then that nurturing, where your leadership abilities of that 10 to 20% is tapping into on almost a daily basis with your workforce. I've always said, if I were to go back into coaching, 3 things. 1, bring together the best staff I could, and I was pretty good at that. 9 of my coaches went on to become head coaches. You obviously have to have a solid structure, bring in the best players you can, and we were pretty good at that in Baltimore. Have a good solid structure. But then as the leader, I would spend every waking minute pushing my workforce towards the leadership of my coaches on a daily basis. Something that hadn't been done before, I used to run our scout teams during the week when you practice. You know, you have your offensive guys will provide scout for the defense, show them, you run the plays of the opponent, and likewise, the defense will run the defense at the offense, so you kind of go back and forth. And usually have an assistant coach do that. I did that for a couple reasons. 1, then I could see in practice what we were actually preparing for. As you know, some of your managers will try to BS you a little bit about, oh yeah, we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. By looking at the practice and actually running the scout teams, I could look at my top managers, my offensive and defensive coordinators, and go, hey, wait a minute, we were going to run a lot of this type of screens. I haven't seen a screen yet. So it was one way of doing that. But the biggest reason I did it, because it forced me to touch every player every day. Not just the stars you coach, but the backups. Now I'm coaching the backups on offense and defense to prep the opposite side of the ball. And I'd have to deal with them, every single one of them, every day. Now that's harder. But that in today's environment, that connectivity is really where the leadership goes from, because that's what they're used to. It's a very personal, that one size fits all just doesn't work anymore. And as you do that, the thing that becomes very apparent is understanding that the key to being a leader, the key to being a good coach is not having the right things to say. People don't follow you because of what you say, they follow you because of why you say it. Is understanding not what you're saying, what are they hearing? And that has to be done almost on an individual basis. I went from Utah State to San Diego State to Stanford University. Now, the players I had at Stanford were different than the players I had at Utah State and San Diego State. Not better, not worse, different. Different collective abilities, different collective experiences. Now, when I was Utah State and San Diego State, I was a young coach, and when you're young and you think the louder you coach, the better you're coaching, right? The screamer, shouter, blue vein, that you learn really doesn't work. So I'm that young coach. I get to Stanford, and I learned that the first day. Run a play, one of my players does something wrong, so I pull out my, aggressive coaching tone. It's, you're wrong. You have no idea what you're doing, do you? And he gets up as cool as the other side of the pillow and goes, evidently not. Well, I thought, whoa, I'm going to have to communicate with this guy. I've got to change the way I approach because he's going to process things. I'm saying the same things about the fundamentals of the play or what we're doing, but he's going to process it a little bit differently. It's like my wife the other day, she says, are there any habits or characteristics you'd like for me to change? And then she gets all mad and storms out halfway through the PowerPoint presentation. Rude, right? I realized that maybe wasn't the best way to communicate what she was asking for. So understanding what the players or the employee's perspective is, I can't tell you a countless number of times what happened. A player would make a mistake, an offensive lineman. Now, when you're an offensive lineman, it's pretty simple. Pretty much every play, it's, okay, if you're covered, meaning there's a guy over the top of you, you do one thing. If you're what we called uncovered, meaning that there's a bubble, there's maybe a linebacker at a different level, but there's nobody right over you, then you do something else in conjunction with, so it's either covered or uncovered. Well, a player will make a mistake and totally whiff on a guy that's in front of him and come off and go, why didn't you block that defensive end or that defensive tackle? He says, Coach, I was uncovered. There was nobody over me. Now, keep in mind, the guy over him is probably 6'3", 6'4", 280, 290 pounds. That's kind of hard to miss. And you'd get the video. Then it used to be the stills. Now it's actually a video on a laptop or a pad. And there's a 280-pound defensive tackle sitting right over the guy. But the fog of war, this guy swore he was uncovered. So to just dog cuss him about, well, that's not going to do any good. Obviously, there was something that was warping his perspective. That's what you have to address, rather than just blame him for being an idiot or yell at him or whatever. That's where the coaching comes from. And in doing so, particularly in today's, I find among a lot of coaches and a lot of business people in our woke, politically correct environment, sometimes you're afraid to assert yourself to be that leader because it's politically incorrect, right? I'm not going to reach out and tell you that you're wrong or step outside. We'll collectively. Leadership is all about sometimes putting yourself out there and demanding that they recognize the circumstances going on. We had a coach, defensive coach, went on to become a head coach. Great coach. He had a habit of when we would get gouged with a big play,
Because I'm on a headset. I can switch back and forth. I can hear all the defensive coaches, or I switch the line over, I can hear all the offensive coaches, what's being called, what the plays are. And this defensive coach would have a habit of, we'd get gouged for a 10, 12-yard play and go, we're okay, we're okay, we're okay. And he'd call the next, and then the next guy, oh, we're okay, we're okay. I don't know if he was trying to calm everybody or calm himself. Well, I forget who we were playing, but this team just was 10, 15 yards at a pop, all the way down the field. And after everything, we're okay. And then he'd call the next defense. So they're 8, 9 plays, 10 plays down the field, score. So I switch over to the defensive line and said, okay, guys, we've got a new rule. When a team goes 90 yards in 7 plays, we are no longer friggin' okay. I want to see headsets thrown. I want to see chalkboards broken. I want to hear somebody's mother come into the conversation, okay? Because the players need to know that you understand. I've always said, you know, the old adage of the person that can keep their head about them when all others are losing theirs, maybe doesn't understand the situation, okay? There's a time where your workforce needs to see that you understand, yeah, we're in a tough position here. They need to see, you need to kick dirt on home plate to show them that you understand the circumstance. Because if you can develop that kind of relationship, then when you have to make those tough calls, where basically you got to make it up and go forward, they're going to buy into it. I heard the head of one, I'm losing his name right now, head of Intel, get up and said, we're going to be much more, this isn't a very technical field, we're going to be a much more successful company if rather than following the right call, but nobody believes in it, we're going to be much more successful than if we take the wrong call, but we all buy in and we all push it forward. We've got a much better success rate at that. If you can be that guy that leads it. We had a quarterback in Baltimore for a short while, Steve McNair, God rest his soul. Great young man. Very talented, quick to smile. Players love Steve. Just because, you know, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. Steve would connect with all the players on a personal basis, just by his personality. And the players loved him for it. They'd do whatever Steve said. Well, we're down in New Orleans, and I was calling the plays at the time, and so I sent in a play, and Steve, and it was going to be this bunch route where you get all the receivers bunched over into here, play action pass, and throw over here. Well, we come out in the I formation, run a toss, and go 80 yards for a touchdown. I'm confused, but I'm happy. Derek Mason, one of our receivers, is the first guy off the field. I go, Derek, what was the play call? He said, Coach, Steve said toss right. No, what was the formation, the snap count, the structure? What? He goes, Coach, he called toss right. I said, Derek, we don't have a play called toss right. Derek goes, I know. But he had 10 other players that believed him so much, they just thought, all right, we'll figure it out. Steve said toss right. We're going to toss right. On a corporate level, I heard Chip Mason, Leg Mason Company, fabulous company. I did a session with them about this bigger room. This was 6 months to the day after 9/11, okay? And I did my thing, and then I asked Chip, I said, can I sit around? Because this was going to be kind of a State of the Union, and they were going to ask Chip questions. He goes, oh, no problem, Brian, you're welcome to stay. So first guy up says, Chip, 6 months ago to the day, you had us all in this same room. The day after 9/11, unprecedented terror, no one knew. You told us that in 6 months, here's where we're going to be as an economy. Whether it was the prime rate, commercial rates, whatever, housing, whatever the 5 indices that he pulled out. He said, what's going to be this, and this. He said, Steve, Chip, you nailed it. How did you know? And in typical self-deprecating servant leader mentality, Chip, because the instinct is that something like that, as the leader, it's kind of to puff up and go, well, you know, I'm the boss. I'm supposed to know this stuff. But Chip, in typical self-deprecating, humble style, said, you want to know the truth? I made it all up. Because that's what you needed to hear. You needed to hear it was going to be okay. Now, he did that at risk, because had it turned out differently, then his workforce would have thought, well, the old man's losing it. He said it was going to be this, and it's not. But he was willing to put himself out there at the risk of being wrong, because he knew that's what his workforce needed, okay? That's real leadership. That's that 10 to 20% where you're really going to be a leader. I learned that, of all things, from my then 16-year-old daughter. Aubrey's the one that's head of HR for Abercrombie, my lawyer. I'm going to take you back to my first year. I got to tell you about Aubrey. Take you back to my first year in Baltimore. She's 15. I take over a team that hadn't had a winning season since its inception. Now, we end up going 8-8, not particularly ambitious, but it's the first non-losing season they had had. We're early in the season, and we play Kansas City on a Thursday night, and we just get killed. And, you know, it's late, and so by the time I get done with the players and the trainers and the media and whatever, I get home. It's about 2:30 in the morning. My wife and 2 daughters have been home in bed. And I get home, and there's a note on my pillow from Aubrey. Now, I got to fast forward a year. We're playing the then Oakland Raiders in the Black Hole in Oakland, and that's aptly named. See, when you go and play, you used to play in Oakland Coliseum, they didn't let you just go in the normal way. They would cut a hole in the fence off it's I-80 or whatever one that goes up the peninsula. And they make the visiting buses go right through the heart of the Raider Nation. True story. We're in the championship game. We pull off, cutting the fence, and there's I'll say mid-60-ish grandmotherly looking lady with her, I'll say 10, 11, 12-year-old daughter, both dressed in Raider regalia, both flipping the bus off as we go by. You know, that good Raider family entertainment they got going. Well, we go in and we beat the Raiders. We're going to the Super Bowl. Exciting time. Afterwards, as I always did, called home. My wife of now 46 years, she's crying. You know, oh, we worked so hard. We're going to a Super Bowl. My then younger daughter, my 10-year-old daughter, she doesn't know why she's crying, but mom's crying, so she's crying. And then my 16-year-old Aubrey gets on the phone. Cool as could be. He goes, Dad, we made a lot of money today, didn't we? Okay. Aubrey got it. Let me take you back to that note. Different times, critical times, not doing so well. I look at the note, 2:30 in the morning. It said, Dad, this has been a tough move for us. Keegan and I are in new schools. You know how hard it is for Mom to make friends. This has been tough on us. You're our rock. You're the one we always lean on. You're making this about you. Get over it. How about that? And she was right. At that time, I was not being the leader. I was more focused on what does this mean for me and what's going to happen. I wasn't thinking about what my players were going through and how important that was. That really is the key for success, to take yourself out of your personal circumstance, sometimes with vulnerability, and do that 10 to 20% of leading that really hallmarks that as a leader. And it's hard to do it sometimes because it doesn't always go well. So as you look at this dynamic and what's required of you as that leader, keep those things in mind. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. People don't follow you because of what you say, they follow you because of why you say it. And people don't care what you know until they know that you care. If you put those together almost on a daily basis, now you're going to be servicing that workforce in a way that they need to be serviced. And to whatever that equivalent of a Super Bowl ring is, you're going to end up with that achievement by holding on to those principles. Now, I've got just a few minutes. I'm going to open it. We could talk about the subject matter. I know we got some fans here. Got any Baltimore fans? All right, love to answer your questions. Got any Steeler fans? Steelers. You can answer your own damn questions. I got to go to my country because I live in Columbus now. Got any Bengal or Browns fans? All right. You definitely want to come up. I'm wearing my Super Bowl ring, something you've never seen before. Okay. See, you've been listening for a long time. You're getting a little tired. I got to get your interest back up. Let me open. You can shout it out. A couple questions. Can be about your team. Can be about the subject matter. We don't have a micro. Oh, we do have a micro. Oh, here's a question back here. Yes, sir.
As I look around this room, we're all quarterbacks of our own little practices, our own teams. One of the things that I've always seen about great quarterbacks is that they have to win in the locker room before they win on the field. What insight can you give us in regards to our own locker room within our team so that we can produce at a higher level? You did something pretty incredible when you won that Super Bowl. You had a quarterback that's not in the Hall of Fame. You've always had my respect for that. So it showed a lot about your coaching ability. And what we go through every day isn't just coaching our team, but once again, we're in the locker room, what we do in our office. Thank you.
Excellent point to bring up what I'm talking about. In our Super Bowl run, Trent Dilfer was our quarterback. We started out with Tony Banks, actually started out 4-2, and then Tony struggling, not seeing things, and so I go with Trent. Trent Dilfer was on the back end of his career, limited physically in what he's doing, but we had to make the change, okay? And I'll tell you why Trent captured that locker room. We had the all-time best single-season defense in the history of the NFL. We had a great running game. So our formula was to run the ball, try not to turn the ball over, win on defense. Now, this is a quarterback who's on a one-year contract who needs to generate numbers in order to get that next payday. But Trent was one of my pigs. Trent gave himself to the process, and on a daily basis in practice and on a daily basis in the games, showed the team, I'm going to do what's in the best interest of the team, not in my best interest. That's how you win the locker room, on a day-to-day basis. And that productivity, not in that he's throwing for 3 and 4 and 500 yards in a game. Leadership can stem from that as well. A lot of quarterbacks are the de facto leaders because they're their best player, and therefore the players are going to respond to them. But when you have a quarterback who isn't generating those big numbers, but they can see on a daily basis is giving themselves over to the process because this is what we need to do to win. That's how Trent Dilfer won that locker room, because the players understood they could trust him to do the things that was in the team's best interest and not just his personal best interest. You know, it's interesting, I'll tell you a true story. That year, a lot of people forget the year we won the Super Bowl, we had a stint in October, we lost 4 out of 5 games. We had a 3-game losing streak. In the NFL, think about that. You lose 3 games in a row in the NFL, that's like losing 12 games in a row in the NBA. That's like losing 26 games in a row in Major League Baseball. If you lose 20, you get mail. And I got mail. And it's the kind that cut up magazine letters and you want to dip in a bucket of water because you're not sure what's in it. There was one, though, God's honest truth. Big, thick, was long envelope and had a letterhead. It was lawyer, accountant, very professional. Opened up 12 pages. And I got to tell you, he had some good stuff. But at the end of the day, he couldn't help but be a fan because he said, I don't know why I'm sharing this with you because you're just a dumb son of a bitch. Okay, you lose like that, you're going to get the slings and arrows. We go on an 11-game winning streak. Beat the New York Giants in Super Bowl 35. Come back to my office. Mail's a little bit different, obviously. Same letterhead, same guy. I'm thinking, okay, this is what it's about. Fair enough. You take the slings and arrows, weren't doing well. I'm a dumb SOB. I get it. Open up the letter. God's honest truth. Had one line. Said, don't get cocky. You're still a dumb son of a bitch. So you got to keep that humility in there someplace. Another question. Anybody can? You know, I did this one time. Coca-Cola contracted with me to do 5 events. And they would dole me out to their vendors, just as, oh, you're having a keynote, you know, you need a keynote here, let us provide that for you. So Bilo in the Southeast, grocery chain, I go down to Greensboro and I'm talking to about 300 or 400 of their top managers, and I do my thing, and I think I'm connected, and I open up for questions, nothing, not a hand. I think, God, I thought I was connected here. So the guy comes up, he says, Coach, you did a great job. I go, I'm sorry, somehow I didn't connect. No one had any questions. He goes, oh, no. Their year-end bonus checks are waiting for them in the foyer. That would have been nice to know. So none of your year-end checks are waiting in the foyer. So I think we got time for 1 or 2 more questions. Anything about a team or? Yes, sir.
Yeah. How was he coaching Ray Lewis?
Ray Lewis, yeah. Ray Lewis was the most dynamic individual personality. And I've coached 17, or been allowed to work with 17 Hall of Famers. For whatever you view Ray Lewis, unbelievable leader, obviously gifted talent. But that leadership that I'm talking about every single day, every meeting, every weight workout, every game, Ray is front and center. That Wednesday morning meeting with my team, front row, book open, pencil at the wrist. Now, this is a guy that's going to walk into the Hall of Fame that honestly, as a coach, if he wanted to be different and do it, I would have had to accommodate him because he was clearly the best player. But he understood, no, My best player, Ray Lewis, understood I have to empower my coach with the rest of the team to be that leader, recognizing that was the best way for the collective success. Tell you my favorite Ray Lewis story. We're playing the Cleveland Browns. Now, the year we won the Super Bowl, the year we broke, it was interesting. I go from 1998, the highest scoring offense in the history of National Football League, to 2000, the lowest scoring defense, the best defense in the single season in the history of football. Interesting contrast. And if you're going to break the all-time scoring record defensively, you got to get a lot of shutouts. So we were playing Cleveland, and I'm sorry, but they were terrible. Spurgeon Wynn was your quarterback. It was ugly. So we knew we're going to get a shutout. And like I said, I'm working the scout team, and my guys are on it all week. They want that shutout. We're in Baltimore. They show up. They get the ball, first series on the 20-yard line. They go 80 yards for a touchdown. And we're just stunned. Stadium is stunned. I'm stunned. The defense is stunned. So they're down there. They're coming off, so I'm walking towards them. I'm going to do my head coaching thing. And Ray Lewis comes running off and says, "Don't say a thing. I've got it." So I'm a smart guy. I turned left and went to the Kool-Aid and a Gatorade and got a drink. Now, I don't know what Ray said to them, but he got that group together. 80 yards in the first drive. We gave up 110 yards total on the day. That means the remaining 3.5 quarters, we gave up a total of 30 yards. It was ugly. Now, I don't know what Ray said to them, but as that leader, the way the players responded to him, differently than Steve McNair. I was the first coach that let my players go home at night in training camp. Just because you sleep better at home, right? And we were in a location, we were up at, I think it's McDaniel College now. It was Western Maryland at the time. But we're close enough to where we all were, so you could go home at night. But I told the players, now look, I did that for 10 years. I told the players, now I'm gonna let you do this, because my thought was always, you act like men, I'll treat you like men. If you act like kids, I'll treat you like kids. So I was trying to, empower them to take control of the team. I said, now, if I have a problem, you miss a weight workout, you're late for a meeting, late for practice, God forbid, then I'm pulling you all back into the hotel, and you got to go tell Ray Lewis why he can't go home tonight to sleep in his own bed. 10 years, I never had one incident. Not one. Because they respected that, and they recognized they weren't going to let Ray Lewis down, because they knew Ray Lewis wasn't going to do that. So it was incredible to have that kind of leadership. And it's amazing, those 17 Hall of Famers that I was able to be around, all different personalities, different capabilities, but I will tell you, to a man, they all bought into, I've got to empower the coach if we're going to succeed collectively. So even if they didn't agree, they would buy into, this is what we have to do. That's when you've got something special. One more question.
This is probably going to be painful for you.
Go ahead.
You talked about the Raiders having 7 coaches in 10 years. A lot of the NFL does the exact same thing. The Steelers have 3 in their history. What makes their organization different and all these others that just keep evolving going?
Because they fight off the outside influences and maintain their belief in the people they work with. And that's so important. Bill Cowher went, I think prior to retiring in years, I'm going to say 8, 9, and 10, did not go to the playoffs. I think it was like 3 or 4 years. Where most teams would have pulled the trigger on Bill Cowher. They stuck with it because they believed. Here's the thing about, and I get contacted occasionally. I just had a conversation with a group a couple weeks ago that are going to be in the market for a head coach. And like I said, I was fortunate enough to have 9 of my guys go on and become head coaches. So occasionally organizations will reach out to me and say, will you help us look at the field and who we ought to be looking at as head coaches? What most organizations do, and you can see it all the time, and I think you'll relate to it as businesses, rather than having a clear understanding of what their values are and what their prime directive is, they bring in the 6, 7, 8 flavors of the month coordinators and say, okay, I liked what you said best, so I'm going to make you the head coach. Rather than saying, well, wait a minute now, what are the specific attributes? What do you think your head coach needs to do and be? And that's hard. I mean, really drilling down because it's different from some organizations to the other, again, due to management. The way the Maras in New York and the Rooneys in Pittsburgh do things differently than Jerry Jones, or the Browns in Cincinnati. Not to say one's better or worse, but have different beliefs in their value system as to what it takes to win, due to their different experiences. Again, not one being right or wrong, but drilling down into what are we as an organization? What do we truly believe in? Not just PR and put it out there. What do we truly believe in? And therefore, what do we think are the attributes that our head coach needs to have? And sometimes that leads you to an individual that may not be the flavor of the month, may not be the big name. But Bill Cowher was not a big name. Mike Tomlin was not a big name. And they received criticism for him. Well, why'd you hire these guys? They weren't, when I got hired, again, we broke the all-time scoring record. I was a big name. It was an easy hire because I had all the publicity at the time. But those teams, when my replacement in Baltimore, John Harbaugh, was a specialty team coach in Philadelphia. No one was thinking of John as a head coach. I told Ozzie Newsome, you need to go talk to this guy, because I know the organization. I know what Steve Bisciotti wants. I know John Harbaugh's values. He's not the big name, okay, that a lot of people will know, but I think that would be a good fit. And John's been phenomenal that way. A lot of organizations just won't do that. Partly, they won't succumb to no, we need the splash. We need to win the news cycle. We need to win the day, as opposed to, no, I want to be more long-term. But the harder part is really drilling down. The one organization that I'm talking to right now that wants me to kind of help them with their next coaching search, I give them credit because they've been through a sequence of a lot of coaches. And I give ownership. This is hard for an owner, multi-billionaire, to say, I'm wrong. For whatever reason, the way I'm going about doing this isn't working. I'm taking the wrong perspective. I need help in finding, because obviously we're not doing it. And that's hard to do, particularly for upper management, because they think of that as being, well, I'm admitting my weakness. That's hard. But if you can fight through that, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, definitely one of those organizations. And then John went through the same thing, won the Super Bowl. I won the Super Bowl in the second year. And went through, again, 3 or 4 years. I think he didn't make 4 years, didn't make the playoffs. And Steve openly said, I'm going to let him go 1 more year, and then that's it. And he was doing it for a lot of different reasons. But you stick with them through the hard time if you believe that the criteria you were using in hiring them was right. And that's when you're rewarded with that kind of stability. And it's hard at times. Folks, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time.